Welcome back to Rooted Hearts Homestead.
Hi guys, welcome back to Rooted Hearts Homestead. Today, once again, we are inside as the outside is not as nice as it could be. We have had some huge weather events come through here in the form of wind, which has been really crazy. It blew our trampoline like 50 to 75 feet into our neighbor's yard. We had a heck of a time getting that back today. And it has been days of just trying to figure out where everything is because it all blew away. Things that we wouldn't have expected to blow away, blew away. So we've been doing a lot of cleanup, but we're all safe. We're all fine. We kept power, which was amazing. And now we're just on the back end of it doing cleanup. Thankfully, it is not completely frozen outside. And it's still nice enough to be out there doing stuff. So like I said last week, I am doing a little mini series on things that I think make our homestead ours. The first thing was kids, and I explained to you a lot of what we do with our kids and why we do it with our kids. And the second thing for you is going to be a garden. I think a garden is important for multiple reasons, but one of the main ones for me is having food that I grew on my table. And it's important not because I need to be free from the grocery store or I have to raise my food my way. It's important because it's something that I can do for my family. That was a huge why for me when I started. Let's take this back to 4 years ago. My husband went to a conference and learned all about organic stuff. He was just starting to learn about growing organic blueberries. Went to this conference to further his knowledge. When he came back, he told me, what would we have to do to be fully organic? And that got my mind kind of like going, okay, what do we have to do to be fully organic? So the next year, I grew a garden. It wasn't big. It wasn't even pretty. But it was vegetables that were for us. We had 4 pickle plants, 3 green bean plants, a few cabbage, some zucchini and squash, and a few lettuces. That was it. That was all I grew. But I was able to go out to my garden and harvest from that for my family. I knew I was raising it organically. I knew I was raising it the way I wanted it to be raised, and then it had the nutrients in it that needed to feed my growing children. Instead of just buying stuff from the store, which we could do, we would have had to increase our budget a lot to be able to buy organically from the store. Whereas a packet of seeds from a seed company is usually between $2 and $4. Sometimes you can find them even less if you get a sale. So cost-wise for me, it was important. It also was important because at that time, I was using none of my almost 4 acres. We had a front yard and a backyard and flowers that I hadn't put in because when we inherited this place, I was still just using what was there. So for me, I was like, this is a great way to use my home. The next year, I grew an even bigger garden and had a garden that was in rows, and it was, I believe, 30 feet by 40 feet. Now, I didn't utilize all of that space for gardening, and some of that was paths and growing space for the different plants, so it wasn't like crammed in square foot gardening. It was a very loose garden. I can show you a picture of that. It was beautiful in that I had never grown something like that before, and I was amazed at what I could grow. I canned so many tomatoes, I canned pickles, I canned beets. I learned how to do all these things because I didn't know. And that was our second year having a homestead. I would have never called it that because I didn't think that was considered homesteading. But if you are growing your own food, you're homesteading. It doesn't matter if you have a porch with tomato plants on it, or if you have a massive farm, you're homesteading. That's homesteading. You are growing food for yourself. When I did that big garden 2 years ago, that was huge for me. I had no idea I could actually do that. So it led me for this past year to do a few things. And I'll walk you through what I did, even though my garden turned out to be an absolute disaster. Super sad garden for the year 2021. And you guys followed along with that and heard about my disappointments and failures in that area. We did end up having some tomatoes, some corn, and a very few squash. But for the most part, we grew peas, and that was it. It was okay. And it's sad coming off the backside of it, but we look at, okay, what did we do different? Let me show you how I planned out my garden. One of the big changes I made for 2021 was I got a planner and printed it out. I found this resource free online. If you Google Homestead Planner, you can find all sorts of different people that have all sorts of different resources and find one that works for you. I kept a ton of information in my whole thing. It has all sorts of things, from information on our rabbits to different plants and seeds that we wanted to use. And all I did for my garden this year was make a list of the seeds I wanted and what I thought I needed for my family, plus some, because I knew I wanted to be able to give some away or to sell some as a CSA box. After that, I printed out, this is basically our whole homestead right here. And I knew that I was going to have chickens and turkeys and all that back in this area. And I knew that this is our main backyard, so I didn't want to be using that area. And then, of course, we have where our buildings are. None of this was going to be used for gardens. So I went ahead and I purposefully planned my garden space up in the front corner here. Access to water is right here and right here. So I knew it would have an easy access to water, be easily accessed from my house, which is right here on the front part of our property. I laid out in square foot measurements where I wanted things, how I wanted things, so that I could grow everything possible. I wanted to try growing it all. After 2020's incredibly successful garden, I wanted to try growing anything that I could in a more quantity, because I thought, well, if I can fill my pantry with things from my garden, that's less stuff that I'm having to buy from Costco. One of the things I loved about planning all of this was that I was able to do it during the winter. So a time when I wasn't doing much other than teaching my kids school anyway. So it's filled my time with the excitement of March and starting to grow things. Another thing I did this year that I really loved is I printed out a calendar, and I put on this calendar exactly when I wanted to plant things. That made a huge difference for me. I could look at a glance at my month and go, okay, this week I need to do this. This week I need to plant this. And it just kind of kept track of everything in my mind for me. After I had kind of figured out what my garden was going to look like, I went ahead and started making it. And that went really well. Actually, I had a beautiful laid out garden. It was wonderful. And then everything froze. And then everything flooded. Not 3 weeks later. Between the two things, it completely wiped out my garden. So for this next year, here's a few things that we're going to do different in our garden and why we think they'll work better. The first thing that I'm going to do different is I'm going to put my garden where my chickens have been. That way there is plenty of manure in that area, and we also have put some of our pig manure into our garden, and that has manure and straw and all sorts of stuff in it, and our chickens have been scratching that up. They are having a heyday. They love that stuff. We use that as nutrients to start our garden next year. Another thing we're going to do is we're going to use fabric, and this is simply because I this year did not plan on having an infant, and I did, and I'm really glad that we did. We love the fact that we're adding a fifth child to our family, but it also means that more of my time is taken with that child. So because of those simple things that change during the year, I decided let's use garden fabric for our garden this year, so that way we're not fighting with weeds all season long. The third thing that I'm changing is I'm partnering with someone else to grow my garden. I recently had the opportunity to ask my sister-in-law to come and garden with me for the 2022 season, and we are so excited to be growing food for our families. Each of us has 5 kids and lots of hungry bellies that need to be filled, and we want to fill them with good food. So that'll change things as well for the 2022 garden. Now to get into some practical things that I have found worked for me. Number 1 is storing my seeds in Crayon boxes. I love this. Not only does it keep them dry, and I'm like dry. Like I accidentally left one of these out in the garden once. No problem. Not an issue at all. It came back and I opened it up and I was like, whoa, these seeds are still fine. I have them folded in half. That's the only thing I don't like about this storage system, but I can easily pull out whatever seed I'm needing and access them in the garden. If I know that I'm planting tomatoes that day, I just grab my tomatoes and I go out there and I can plant them. Another thing that I'm going to keep for the year 2022 that worked really well for me was having a garden calendar. And that was a calendar I showed you earlier, and it just made sense for me to have that going. Another thing I'm going to do is try new seeds. So every year I go and I buy seeds. Lots of them. This year, I tried not to buy as many because I already had a few. So, from Baker Creek, one of the new seeds that I got was flowers. Like, a lot of them. Love flowers. I got my same beets, people. I'm not changing my mind on those. I know what beets I like. These are tasty. My kids will eat them. You can put them raw on things. Yeah, these are my favorite beets. So if you're wanting beets that are not as beety, I would recommend these two. But now back to flowers. We got flowers this year, and one of the things that I love is including my kids in this process. These flowers are mostly for Beth. She wants to plant flowers all over the place, and so I was like, yeah, let's do it. I always try a few new types of tomatoes as well, just to see what types I like. I don't want more than like 5 or 10 types of tomatoes in my garden at any given time. So I get ones that I know that I'm gonna be able to can and use or put fresh on top of a salad. And one of my new ones that I got this year was a cream sausage. I thought it looked interesting. But what I'm really excited about, find it here, I had organized everything. Okra. We're gonna see how it grows. I got 2 different types, and my sister-in-law has this little like secret way she uses okra. She puts it in smoothies. I would have never thought to do that. So I grabbed okra. I thought, let's do it. Let's make it and freeze it, and we'll see how it goes. One thing that I think is really important is trying out new seeds to see what you like. Just because one gardener recommends a type of seed, like me recommending these beets, doesn't mean that that's actually going to grow well for you and serve your needs well. I had both recommend and not recommend for growing a Chinese noodle bean. And I found that we loved these incredibly long beans. I had a beautiful trellis of them and they would just hang down. Not only did it bring me joy internally, but they also tasted really good in stir fries, which are most of what we eat during the summer. I recommend if you're gonna have a garden that you learn how to can. I did not know how to can when I started gardening. And very quickly, you will learn that you have to be able to put up or store for winter what you're pulling out of your garden. I learned how to can 3 years ago. I started very simple. I started with a jam. It wasn't a jelly. It wasn't jiggly enough to be a jelly. It was a jam. And I learned how to can by trial and error. I'm still learning how to can. I've learned how to start. I started with a water bath canner. I would always recommend if you're going to be learning how to can, start with a water bath canner. The water bath canner just is simply easier to use, less trial and error, and a lot less babysitting. I also then went from that to pressure canning, which is a whole other thing on its own. You can look back through my videos and you'll see me pressure can blueberries and teach you how to do it. I had no idea what I was doing when my aunt gave me that beautiful golden pressure canner pot. I thought she was crazy. I honestly put it on a shelf and was like, maybe one day I'll figure out how to do this. And then a couple years ago, I thought, it's time. Now's the time. Here we go. And so we did. Nothing exploded. And as I've gotten more and more comfortable with canning, I've realized this is a lost art. It is that, exactly. It is an art. And the jars just sitting on your shelf, they're so beautiful. Yes, it is a lot of work. But when you go down and you open up that can of tomato sauce and you smell that roasted tomato sauce that you've made from the summer, and it is middle of February and there's a foot of snow outside, there is nothing better. If you're looking to just get started with gardening, I recommend a tomato plant. Go and purchase a pot, purchase a tomato plant, and learn first about if you like gardening. It is something that I do because I know it is the best that I can provide for my family. I hope you've enjoyed today. I know it's been a little bit rushed, but I wanted to be sure and get another video out this week, even through all the crazy we've had with wind and getting ready for Christmas. Such a special time celebrating our Savior's birth. And so I hope that you guys take that time with your family this next week. I do not know if I'll be putting a video up, like I said in video number 1 with this. This is just something that when I get a video made, I get a video made, and I look forward to sharing those with you. Have a good week.